Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Composites Cast Monthly, if that's what we call it. Nick here, ahoy ahoy.
Ahoy hoy, Martin here.
And Martin over there. And we've got a special today. It's a question and answer special. So I'll look after the website and technical things of that nature here at East Coast Fibreglass. And Martin...
Yeah, I usually give out the tech advice after spending years working in the manufacturing side of the business before we were suppliers. I've gained a bit of knowledge and from buying in the products and research, and I've got some knowledge from there. So hopefully I can ask most questions.
And make a lot of videos as well.
That's right, yeah. That. So YouTube's full of our videos. Check that out. There's I don't know how many videos we've got now. It must be nearing, well, maybe over 100 now.
Yeah, maybe a lot anyway. And so hopefully, so what I've done is I've got some questions here which are actual questions we've been asked in the past by our customers that have been answered. And you'll find a lot of those on the FAQ page on East Coast Fibreglass Supplies, or ecfibreglass.co.uk. And also I did a Google search for some commonly asked questions about fiberglass, so I'll try and pick a few of those out as well. And the idea is I'll ask the questions and Martin will answer them. I'll not do some, like the first one here is what is fiberglass, but I think if people are listening to this, they probably know what fiberglass is.
Yeah, they probably already know what fiberglass is. And if you want to go more into detail of what it's made from, it's molten glass with other materials in. In fact, our last podcast, we kind of covered that, didn't we, in a lot more detail.
Yes,
we did the history of fiberglass and how it was made.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so listen to that podcast if you want to know the kind of science behind it and how it's made.
All right, but there's some quite good questions here. So let's start off with, how long does fiberglass last?
Right, I don't think there's a definitive answer to that one. But just to let you know, I mean, we get a lot of questions on how to repair boats. And some of these boats have been around, probably a lot earlier than the 60s.
Right.
There's actually fiberglass cars, and I think the kind of the boom with fiberglass kind of hit round about the 50s, being used in a lot of furniture as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of chairs being fixed, like the kind of modern kind of retro style made out of fiberglass, and there's guys who still restore them, and the actual body itself, the fiberglass, has lasted for years. Outdoors, I don't think it's something that breaks down that well, to be honest. They're actually finding out that a lot of boats that were discarded in the sea, there's actually fish being found with traces of fiberglass in them.
Well, that's good.
Yes, so it doesn't break down that well, to be honest. It's not something that decomposes. It just stays.
Yeah, as plastic does last forever, doesn't it? But if somebody, for example, say they fiberglass their roof, how long is that likely to remain functional and useful for?
If it's done properly, it'll exceed most of us our lifetime. Okay. You'll find that roofers, they'll put the usual 20, 25 years guarantee on it.
Yeah.
Now that'll cover most degradation, like kind of like UV fading. Before it starts to kind of need replacing again. But if it's done properly, it'll last a lifetime.
Right.
When you think about it, all it is the same kind of materials used on a boat hull, which is constantly submerged in salt water.
Yeah.
Yes, some boats have what's known as osmosis, which is blistering of the gelcoat or the first laminate, but it tends to not affect the integrity of the actual hull.
Okay.
It's more of a cosmetic thing, although it does devalue the boat a lot. Now, if you imagine that same laminate, it's on a roof, and it's only going to get rainwater, so it should last a long time, providing everything else is done properly. So providing the laminate's been put down properly, providing it's got a sufficient top coat on, and making sure there's enough expansion and contraction, because if there's none of that, then once the roof starts to kind of expand and contract, it could kind of start damaging the fiberglass. So as long as everything's done properly, you would easily get a lifetime out of a fiberglass.
Which reminds me that we did do an episode about roofing, didn't we, a couple of episodes ago?
That's
so
right,
if you want more in-depth information about fiberglass roofing, check out previous episodes. And that leads us on to another question that apparently gets asked a lot. Is fiberglass waterproof without a top coat?
It's not, no. So if you go back to what I've just mentioned about the roofs and having a top coat on. If you did a roof with no top coat on, or if you moulded something without a gel coat,
Yeah.
where the fibres are just exposed to the top surface, those fibres will draw in moisture, and then when you've got various environmental changes like frost and what have you, water's going to get in there, it's going to freeze, it's going to lift, you're going to start having the resin flaking off. So a lot of old skylights were manufactured without a gel coat or a flow coat on them, and
Right.
you'll see these kind of, on some old buildings, they've got kind of a metal reinforcement mesh within the laminate, but they've never been sealed with anything, and you'll find all the fibres start to kind of, they go glistening on the surface, and the resin's starting to come away and they're starting to break down.
Right,
They're actually
right.
letting in water because the water's coming through, capillary reaction through the fibres, and that's causing it to degrade. Now it'll separate the resin from the fibres, but the fiberglass itself won't kind of decompose or rot. I don't know if anyone's done a test on how many years it would take for fiberglass to decompose.
Right.
I've never seen any
Don't they
documentation
reckon
on that.
plastics last for thousands of years?
Well,
or
plastics
something?
do, yeah.
Yeah.
In glass, it's a byproduct of sand in glass.
Okay, we're going on to fiberglass pools now. When people make fiberglass swimming pools and stuff, and I know you've done videos in the past, I think, of making a baptism pool and things like that.
Yeah, that was a baptism pool, yeah.
And it's a similar process for a swimming pool.
It's a
thing?
similar process with the baptism pool, and that's still in use now. I think I did that more than 10 years ago.
Right.
In fact, it's older than my daughter, so well over 16 years now.
Right.
And that was done with normal Lloyd's approved resin and a standard flow coat, but that was only having normal fresh water in it,
Right.
and it was being emptied. So that material is fine for that. If you're doing a swimming pool, however, it changes things because you've got chlorine in the water.
Ah, right, yeah.
So then you would use chemical resistant products like our 397 PA resin with a 69 PA flow coat.
Right.
We do 69 PA gel coat, but we can convert it to a flow coat,
Right.
and you can get it in various colours if you want. So that's the material, and a powder bound mat as well, not an emulsion bound.
Okay.
So all those materials combined, it gives you a chemical resistant laminate. Even if there's an increase in the chlorine content in the water, it's more resistant
All right,
than a
okay,
normal
good.
fiberglass.
And how much does it cost to make a swimming pool? Obviously, a really rough idea.
To be honest, I can't give a rough idea because I can't remember the last time I did a quote on one.
All right.
But you're talking couple of thousand, depending on the size of the pool.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just for the laminate. That's not including all the structure, the building structure.
And would you always do a concrete, dig it out and then...
Yeah, concrete
Face
base,
up with concrete.
usually breeze block walls, I think they use, and then a render,
Right.
nice smooth render. But your substructure's got to be strong, so we can't really advise on that. You
Yeah.
have a building contractor make sure that that's strong
Ah,
enough
right,
to hold
okay.
the volume of water.
Ah,
So
okay,
if somebody came to me and says, even if they want to use make a standalone fiberglass tank to hold, so many cubic tons of water, I couldn't give that answer.
Right.
Our technical advice goes as far as applying the materials, probably what materials you should use,
Yeah.
how you should use them, but we're not composite engineers, so you would need somebody else to kind of advise that sort of aspect.
Right. And if somebody there's a couple of questions on this. It must get searched a lot, I think. If somebody wanted to make a fiberglass pool, how long would it take them?
Difficult one to answer, to be honest.
Put you on the spot with these today, aren't I?
Yeah, you have, yeah. I mean, typical fiberglass laminates, a professional could probably get it done in, say, within a week.
Right.
Not to say it would take them a week, but for example, when I did the baptism pool, I think I did that in 3 days. Most of the work was done in the first 2 days.
Right.
The last day was just finishing off.
Okay.
It was 45 square metres from memory, I think it was. If anybody hasn't done it before, they might want to take the time, so they might want to do one wall one day and another wall, so
Okay,
they're not doing it, so they're not mixing too much resin. So it could take a couple of weeks. The other thing's temperature as well, so it depends on the weather. But every part of the environment, if everything's good and you've fiberglass before, it is possible to do it in the day. So day one would be your priming your walls if you have to.
Right.
Day two would be applying the fiberglass. If you did that early morning and put the 2 layers on at once, and your surface tissue, it is possible you might later on in the afternoon be able to put your top coat on, or at least finish the top coat the next day. So that would be your kind of schedule.
Right.
That's providing all the temperatures are okay.
All right. Okay. And of course, all the other extra prior work that you were talking about.
Yeah, which would depend on your
frame
contract,
and whatever you
yeah.
need to do beforehand. All right, that's cool. And final one on pools. Do you know, and you might not know this because it's kind of after what you advise on normally, but do they require much maintenance, fiberglass pools?
No, not really. Just your general kind of cleaning that you would have any kind of pool or hot tub or whatever that is.
Right.
You might in time, let's say 10 years down the line, you might see some colour fading. You normally see some colour fading in the first use anyway. It will kind of change shade just slightly. That's why we always say use white or light blue for pools. Don't pick a dark colour because it's not going to be the same shade once you fill that up. But you might in 10 years need to kind of repolish the surface because it might start to kind of UV fade or chalk.
Right, okay. All right, okay, cool. So, all right, what else have I got? All right, well, so that was some general internet questions that people ask about fiberglass stuff. And we'll move on to some genuine questions that we've had from customers now. So you shouldn't be on the spot so much with these, but pressure's on now, of course, isn't it? Oh, and incidentally, don't forget, everybody, if you've got any questions that you'd like Martin or any of the tech advisors here at East Coast Fiberglass, or indeed from our suppliers that sometimes come in, if you've got a question you'd like to ask and have it answered on the pod, then you can email us at compositescast@gmail.com. All right, let's do some of these then. How can you improve the adhesion of fiberglass to a substrate?
So that would be done like anything. You would use some sort of primer. So for example, if for timber you would use, we recommend 491 PA. It's an isophthalic resin. It's got really good bonding properties to it. But you would modify it slightly, so you would thin it with styrene.
Okay.
Going back to our YouTube videos, actually, there's a video on sheathing a wheelhouse for a boat. And on there we demonstrate how we use the 491 PA. And when you thin it down, it soaks into the first layer of ply.
All
Now,
right.
your adhesion's only going to be as good as that first layer of ply. If that comes away, it's going to fail anyway. But
Okay.
that allows it to soak into that first layer of ply, and then you apply your normal kind of laminate and fiberglass. When it comes to concrete, the G4 damp seal or pond seal, it's the same product, different tin, but same product inside the tins, just promoted for different markets. Either of those are good binder for concrete.
Right.
So if you apply that and then let it tack off. Now it's important that you catch it while it's taggy.
Right.
If you don't, it'll have the opposite effect. It'll actually won't
Like
bond
make
to
a
it.
barrier.
Yeah, so I think it's, you would have to read the tins to confirm this, but off the top of my head, I think it's roughly, it has a 4-hour window of staying taggy.
Right.
But I've actually used 491 PA, not thin down, but just as it is on concrete.
Yeah.
And I've had a good bond with that.
Okay.
Probably a much better bond than what I've had with the G4 when I've done ponds.
All right, that's interesting.
And you don't have to worry about that window either.
And I guess, is that because the G4 is polyurethane
It's a polyurethane.
and the others are polyester resin?
Yeah.
So if you're putting polyester on there, it's going to bond better. Is that right?
So polyester doesn't bond that well to fully cured polyurethane.
Right.
But it does work quite well if you catch that sticky kind of window and kind of fuse together. Trying to think of some other good priming agents. So I mean, other than using the resin, there are some board builders that promote putting a layer of catalyst on the boards, but I don't know how well that
Okay.
works. So it's not something I've ever tried or advised.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a weird thing to think about. Okay. Let's. I'll tell you what. We've done a few questions. We'll have a
Hang
little-
on.
Go on.
Just come to my mind there. You can tell this episode isn't scripted at all. We're
No,
just
not
kind
at
of
all.
going through it. So I've just thought of another few priming agents.
Great.
We've got Microseal, which is a good priming agent for PVC.
Right.
You don't need to sand the PVA; it'll actually etch it for you, so it'll kind of kind of fuse to the surface and melt it slightly, and then you can fiberglass onto that.
Right.
PU mastic, like our roofing adhesive, that's a good one for steel. So if for example the roofers, if they're going around a metal soil pipe, if they just simply fiberglass around that, you've got a difference in contraction expansion of the fiberglass and the metal. So what you would do is you would put rings of PU mastic around the pipe.
Right.
Obviously after you've ground it back and you've got a nice clean surface. And then you would put a layer of mat around and use your paddle roller to kind of squeeze the PU mastic into the mat. And then you continue with the normal resin fiberglass over the top. Mm-hmm. So when the fiberglass is cured, what you've literally got is this flexible PU kind of gasket that's created between the two materials.
Right, that's a good idea.
And then you would still put a soil pipe collar over it to allow the water to run off. So there's literally no risk of it getting between. But that's a good primer for metal work.
That's good. Any more?
No, I think that's it. If any pop in my head, I'll shout them out.
All right, so we'll take a very short break for a quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with possibly the number one question that we always get asked.
Did you know at East Coast Fibreglass we have a loyalty scheme where every time you spend, you earn? That's right, for every £1 you spend, we'll give you a point, and every 100 points gives you £1 to spend on future purchases. It's as easy as that. Nothing to fill in or send off for, nothing to sign up to, no codes to enter. Points are automatically applied to your account and are offered during checkout. So join us today at ecfiberglasssupplies.co.uk and start earning points. East Coast Fibreglass, the UK's favourite supplier.
Welcome back. So I don't know if this is the number one question. It's clickbait, audio clickbait. That was no, but I know you get asked this a lot. What's the difference between gel coat? You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Yeah.
And top coat.
And top coat.
Yeah.
In terms of its chemical makeup, not a lot. Basically, top coat, or sometimes known as flowcoat, is essentially a gel coat, or sometimes it can be a resin or a less viscous gel coat, but it's pretty much the same material. The only difference is it's had a wax additive added to it, which is known as paraffin wax, or MW wax as we sell it as. A lot of people do refer to it as paraffin wax. The old timers will always ask for paraffin wax. So it's had the wax added to it. So a gel coat, if anyone's familiar with that goes into your mould. The side of the gel coat that's got direct contact with the mould has no oxygen, so gel coat's air inhibited in its cure, so it'll always be tacky on the top surface. Right. Because it's got no contact with the air against the mould, that'll always pop out with no tackiness to it. The top side of the product will cure tacky. You put your fiberglass onto there, everything fuses together, you get a good bond with your resins, and then once it's cured you pop it out and then you've got a nice gel coat finish. If you want that kind of gel coat finish on the inside, now you won't get the finish that you'll get from a mould. It'll not be a high gloss polished surface. You'll only get that from a mould. But if you want to put a gel coat based product on the inside, just to kind of...
Or on the outside without a mould.
Yeah, just to kind of tidy up that fibrous, horrible fiberglass finish. Yeah. And to seal it, like we said, with the roofs, it usually needs sealing with a top coat. Then what you would do is you would take the gel coat, you would add 2 or 3% wax, mix that in, apply it to the surface. That wax rises separates from the product. It always wants to kind of get away from the product, just like you imagine oil and water. Yeah. So that'll rise to the surface of the product, cut off its air exposure, and it'll cure without any tack. Right. Allowing you, if you wanted to even polish it and rub it back without gumming up the paper.
Where does the wax go after that? It's just sitting there on the top.
It kind of suspends at the uppermost part of the product. If you've got too much, you'll actually see the wax on the top surface. It will just float on the top surface, but you'll hardly even notice it. and it's because of that you can't really put another coat on top. You'll see a lot of videos where people are top coating something, and you have to pretty much take it off back to the resin to get a secure bond. We did a lot of our moulds in the past where we kind of even heavily sanded the top coat, reapply top coat. After a couple of years, it was just flaking off. I think we've got that on a video actually. There is a video, the difference between gel coat and flow coat. And one of those moulds, I'm sure we do drag it out and we kind of show it just peeling off. And that was sanded within an inch of its life, but it's still, the flow coat didn't bond to it. So you have to get back to that kind of pretty much about 90% of that resin fiberglass layer to get, and wash it down with acetone as well to get quite a good chemical bond. So flow coats tend to be used on non-cosmetic side of fiberglass. So you would see it on the inside of engine bays on boats, the inside of hulls, and it does the same job as the gel coat. It stops any moisture getting into those fibers. Cosmetically though, it doesn't look great. You get brush line finish with a brush, you'll get a mottled finish with a roller. You can sometimes thin it down with resin. You've always got to remember to pigment if you're using a clear resin, remember to add more pigment to compensate. So you can thin it down and it will kind of flatten out a bit better. And in terms of putting it on quite thin with a roller, it's not recommended, because if you stretch the product out too far, you're reducing that wax content per square metre. Right. So that's not going to do its job well.
I get you. And don't you use sometimes surface tissue as well to improve the
that'll blend that kind of rough chop strand finish that you get with fiberglass, and then it'll give you a nicer surface to put your flow coat on as well.
Right. Okay. Leading back to something you said earlier, this is another. In fact, it's the first question on the FAQ page on the website. What is styrene, and why is it used in fiberglass?
Styrene is a solvent it's actually already in the resins. So polyester resins, not epoxies. Polyester resins, they're actually known on the transport label as resin in styrene. So I'm not going to go through the list of ingredients in polyester resin because I don't know them, to be honest. But it does contain a solvent known as styrene, and that styrene helps break down the binders in a lot of mattens as well. Right. And you can get that solvent on its own, and that solvent can be used for things like thinning down gel coats, or you can thin down the resins a little bit more. But it will affect the cure. So if you're ever doing any thinning down, you would never go more than, say, 7% to be on the safe side. So it's ideal if you want to kind of convert a gel coat to a kind of a spray gel coat, or so that'll thin a resin down thinner for like we say when we thin down 491P to use it as a primer on plywood. Right.
You would do that with styrene as well. Yeah. Okay, next question. I said it like that.
Try to be trendy because we're podcasting. I'll join in. I'll do one later on.
Right.
That's the answer.
Next question. What's the best way to make a fiberglass mould?
Best way.
That's a whole podcast on its own, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the best way is to make it out of fiberglass.
Right.
So.
That makes sense.
No.
The best way.
It depends on what the product is you're going to make from it. So, if you want a professional mould, use things like tooling gels, which are vinyl ester based. They're really strong. You'll get a lot more lifts off them than what you will a standard gel. With that, you normally need a tie coat, so something that's going to kind of prime the surface for you to be able to put standard polyester tooling resins on as well. So you would start tooling gel coat, and then normally a vinyl ester based first layer, just a lightweight mat to make sure you got full consolidation onto that, and then your polyester tooling resin, which is kind of a filled resin that's got very low shrinkage.
Right.
And with that, you can put all 5 layers on, which is not normally recommended in layups. You normally get told only put 3 layers on maximum, so it doesn't get too hot. But with the tooling resin, it needs that heat. It needs that exotherm to cure and post-cure properly. So 5 layers with the tooling resin, and that will give you a good strong solid, non-distorted mould. It'll actually, whatever you take the mould from, it'll stay that shape, providing your former is solid and not some flexible rubbish ABS thing that's going to move about.
Right.
So that'll give you a good mould. And our moulds, when we used to be in production, we'd have exceeded 1,000 lifts off those moulds.
Oh, wow.
But we used to look after them as well. So it's important you wax them every 2 to 3 lifts. So a rib, a mould with loads of details on, like if it's got loads of ribs or something on it, that would need waxing every 2 lifts.
All right, okay.
And one that hasn't got much detail, say like a car bonnet, you would only give it, one every 3 or 4 lifts.
All right, okay.
But if it's just a one-off part, you can just use standard gel coat and resins to get your mould off.
Right.
And then take your part off. You don't even have to go up to 5 layers.
So say you were replicating a car bonnet for whatever reason, or a part of it, a part of a car, whatever, you could make mould on that.
Yeah.
Make a mould out of fibreglass and gel coat, and then take that off and then cast the part out of that.
Depending on the bonnet as well. If it's a bonnet where you're not too bothered if there's a bit of a twist in your mould because it's going to be going onto a framework, say for like a race car or something, and they usually get damaged quite a lot, so you're not too bothered about the fit. You would do it that way.
Right.
If it's a one-off, but you really want a good fit, then you would use the tool and resin again because of its low shrinkage properties.
Right.
But like for example, we've if you're doing something that's going to be upholstered, like say a motorbike seat, like a seat pan, for a custom bike, which is just it's going to be a one-off, you could just make a cheap mould. In fact, some of those seat pans, you don't actually need a mould. You can literally pretty much model most of the shape from cardboard, fiberglass over it, and that's the finished part.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Another method of doing a quick mould is if you're going to mould off something, coat it with aluminium adhesive tape, and then it only needs a light wax, and you can pull a mould off that. If you can live with the tape lines and show them down.
But if there's something, as you say, going on top of it,
it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
it's
matter,
been
does it?
upholstered, yeah.
What is the best way to apply flowcoat to fiberglass?
Buy a brush, nice thick layer with a brush if you want a good cure to it. Like I said before, you can put it on with a roller, but flowcoat you really need to kind of lay it on.
Yeah.
If you roll it on as if you were, rolling paint on your walls at home, and you put it on quite thin, and you want to do 2 or 3 coats. One, you can't do multiple coats of flowcoat. Secondly, like I mentioned before, if you put it on too thin, there's not enough wax content in there, so you need a good thick layer, and you can control a nice good thick layer if you put it on with a brush.
Right, just a couple more because we're almost out of time, believe it or not. Can you fiberglass on top of fiberglass?
You can, yeah. So you'll get a full bond fiberglass on top of fiberglass within 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
Providing your environment's nice and clean, there's no dust or other contaminants on there. After that, you should always give it a quick sand. Between layers, you should always give it a sand anyway, because if you just put a layer of fiberglass down, you might get the odd strands of glass. That might interfere with your next layer lying flat, so you need to kind of knock those off with a bit of sandpaper anyway. Wipe it down with acetone, and then you get a good bond. A really old laminate, say if it's a old fiberglass roof, you would grind off the old top coat, because remember, top coat, flow coat's nothing will bond to that.
Right.
Bring it back to the fiberglass, wash it down with acetone, even apply another layer of resin, even something like the 491 that gets a good bond.
Right.
And then re-fiberglass it.
Okay, excellent.
Flow coat it.
And the last one, and this is because we have a lot of customers who works in theatres and movies, TV, making props and lots of things like that. In fact, you even had some people come down, didn't you, from The Lion King, I think?
Yeah, The Lion King, the stage production in London. Yeah, we had three of their members who work in the background repairing props.
Yeah.
And they want to learn how to use fiberglass.
So the interesting question that I saw come in, because I see a lot of the emails come in, was somebody wanted to recreate a giant pea pod, and I think they had the original one, and they wanted to take a cast off that. Now they didn't say what it was made of, so bearing that in mind, how would they take a cast off of that?
If the original's fiberglass, especially if it's got a gel coat finish, it's dead easy,
right?
Because you can just wax it up and pretend that's as if it was a mould, and you can put your after you put your release agents on, you can put your gel coat on your fiberglass and you can pop a mould off that. Right. It gets a bit complicated if it's other different materials.
Yeah, I mean it could be like wood.
Yeah, if it's been
paper mache,
if it's been painted with a car paint or lacquer, for example, that will melt under the process. So you need to strip that off first. You check what material is made from, because some of them do react badly to even the release agents. The PV release agent, that's alcohol based, so if alcohol is going to attack the surface, you can't use the PV release agent. So you'd have to kind of strip whatever coatings off it, or you might have to put something else on top of that to seal whatever it is. So polystyrene, for example, would have to be sealed. Again, aluminium tape's great for covering that if you're going to fiberglass over it. Not great for moulding off, because you're going to get the creases and whatever popping off. But it all just depends on what it is. So it's always a good idea, if you're not sure, just always give us a call, speak to myself or any of our tech team, and they'll be able to kind of assist you what you should be moulding off that particular material. Right.
So the first stage is you got to know what your original pea pod's made out of.
That's right. Yeah.
And then to get a good podcast, just give us a call and we'll tell you how to do a podcast.
Yep.
And on that terrible dad joke, I think we'll wrap up for today. Thanks for listening, everybody, and hope to see you again next time. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, do send us an email at compositescast@gmail.com.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Martin. Bye, everyone.
Bye.